Καλησπέρα και καλώς ήρθατε σε άλλη μια λέξη εκφραστικής ανάγνωσης εν μέσω κορονοϊού 2020. Σήμερα τελειώνουμε προσωρινά το αφιέρωμά μας στον Laurence Sterne, και λέω προσωρινά γιατί έχει γράψει και άλλα ωραία κείμενα που μπορούμε να επισκεφτούμε στο μέλλον, με τα 5 πρώτα κεφάλαια από τον ένατο και τελευταίο τόμο του μυθιστορήματος The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman, που υπενθυμίζω ότι έχει μεταφραστεί στα ελληνικά για όσους θέλουν να το διαβάσουν σε μετάφραση. The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman. Siquid urbaniuscule lusum anobis permusas et charitas et omnium poetarum numina orote neme male capias. Volume 9. A dedication to a great man. Having a priori intended to dedicate the amours of my Uncle Toby to Mr. So-and-so, I see more reasons a posteriori for doing it to Lord So-and-so. I should lament from my soul if this exposed me to the jealousy of their reverences, because a posteriori in court Latin signifies the kissing hands for preferment, or anything else in order to get it. My opinion of Lord So-and-so is neither better nor worse than it was of Mr. So-and-so. Honours, like impressions upon coin, may give an ideal and local value to a bit of base metal, but gold and silver will pass all the world over without any other recommendation than their own weight. The same goodwill that made me think of offering up half an hour's amusement to Mr. So-and-so when out of place operates more forcibly at present, as half an hour's amusement will be more serviceable and refreshing after labour and sorrow than after a philosophical repast. Nothing is so perfectly amusement as a total change of ideas. No ideas are so totally different as those of ministers and innocent lovers. For which reason, when I come to talk of statesmen and patriots, and set such marks upon them as will prevent confusion and mistakes concerning them for the future, I propose to dedicate that volume to some gentle shepherd, whose thoughts proud science never taught to stray, far as the statesman's walk or patriot way, yet simple nature to his hopes had given, out of a cloud-capped head a humbler heaven, some untamed world in depth of woods embraced, some happier island in the watery waste, and where admitted to that equal sky his faithful dogs should bear him company. In a word, by thus introducing an entire new set of objects to his imagination, I shall unavoidably give a diversion to his passionate and lovesick contemplations. In the meantime, I am the author. Chapter 1. I call all the powers of time and chance which severely check us in our careers in this world to bear me witness that I could never yet get fairly to my Uncle Toby's amours till this very moment, that my mother's curiosity, as she stated the affair, or a different impulse in her, as my father would have it, wished her to take a peep at them through a keyhole. Call it, my dear, by its right name, quoth my father, and look through the keyhole as long as you will. Nothing but the fermentation of that little superset humour which I have often spoken of in my father's habit could have vented such an insinuation. He was, however, frank and generous in his nature, and at all times open to conviction, so that he had scarce got to the last word of this ungracious retort when his conscience smote him. My mother was then conjugally swinging with her left arm twisted under his right in such wise that the inside of her hand rested upon the back of his. She raised her fingers and let them fall. It could scarce be called a tap, or if it was a tap, it would have puzzled a casuist to say whether it was a tap of remonstrance or a tap of confession. My father, who was all sensibilities from head to foot, classed it right. Conscience redoubled her blow. He turned his face suddenly the other way, and my mother, supposing his body was about to turn with it in order to move homewards by a cross movement of her right leg, keeping her left as its centre, brought herself so far in front that as he turned his head he met her eye. Confusion again. He saw 1,000 reasons to wipe out the reproach, and as many to reproach himself. A thin, blue, chill, pellucid crystal with all its humours so addressed, the least mote or speck of desire might have been seen at the bottom of it, had it existed. It did not, and how I happened to be so lewd myself, particularly a little before the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, heaven above knows. My mother, madam, was so at no time, either by nature, by institution, or example. A temperature current of blood ran orderly through her veins in all months of the year, and in all critical moments both of the day and night alike. nor did she superinduce the least heat into her humours from the manual effervescences of devotional tracts, which, having little or no meaning in them, nature is oft times obliged to find one. And as for my father's example, 'twas so far from being either aiding or abetting thereunto, that 'twas the whole business of his life to keep all fancies of that kind out of her head. Nature had done her part to have spared him his trouble, and what was not a little inconsistent, my father knew it. And here am I sitting this 12th day of August 1766 in a purple jerkin and yellow pair of slippers, without either wig or cap on, a most tragic-comical completion of his prediction that I should neither think nor act like any other man's child upon that very account. The mistake of my father was in attacking my mother's motive instead of the act itself, for certainly keyholes were made for other purposes, and considering the act as an act which interfered with a true proposition and denied a keyhole to be what it was, it became a violation of nature, and was, so far, you see, criminal. It is for this reason, and please your reverences, that keyholes are the occasions of more sin and wickedness than all other holes in this world put together. Which leads me to my Uncle Toby's amours. Chapter 2. Though the corporal had been as good as his word in putting my Uncle Toby's grey Ramilly wig into pipes, yet the time was too short to produce any great effects from it. It had lain many years squeezed up in the corner of his old campaign trunk, and as bad forms are not so easy to be got the better of, and the use of candle ends not so well understood, it was not so pliable a business as one would have wished. The corporal, with cheery eye and both arms extended, had fallen back perpendicular from it score times to inspire it, if possible, with a better air. Had spleen given a look at it, 'twould have cost her ladyship a smile. It curled everywhere but where the corporal would have it, and where a buckle or two, in his opinion, would have done it honour, he could as soon have raised the dead. Such it was, or rather such would it have seemed upon any other brow, but the sweet look of goodness which sat upon my Uncle Toby's simulated everything around it so sovereignly to itself, and nature had moreover wrote gentleman with so fair a hand in every line of his countenance, that even his tarnished gold-laced hat and huge cockade of flimsy taffeta became him. And though not worth a button in themselves, yet the moment my Uncle Toby put them on, they became serious objects, and altogether seemed to have been picked up by the hand of science to set him off to advantage. Nothing in this world could have co-operated more powerfully towards this than my Uncle Toby's blue and gold, had not quantity in some measure been necessary to grace. In a period of 15 or 16 years since they had been made by a total inactivity in my Uncle Toby's life, for he seldom went further than the bowling green, his blue and gold had become so miserably too straight for him that it was with the utmost difficulty the corporal was able to get him into them. The taking them up at the sleeves was of no advantage. They were laced, however, down the back and at the seams of the sides, etc., in the mode of King William's reign, and to shorten all description, they shone so bright against the sun that morning, and had so metallic and doughty an air with them, that had my Uncle Toby thought of attacking in armour, nothing could have so well imposed upon his imagination. As for the thin scarlet breeches, they had been unripped by the tailor between the legs, and left at 6s and 7s. Yes, madam, but let us govern our fancies. It is enough they were held impracticable the night before, and as there was no alternative in my Uncle Toby's wardrobe, he sallied forth in the red plush. The corporal had arrayed himself in poor Lefebvre's regimental coat, and with his hair tucked up under his Montero cap, which he had furbished up for the occasion, marched 3 paces distant from his master. A whiff of military pride had puffed out his shirt at the wrist, and upon that, in a black leather thong clipped into a tassel beyond the knot, hung the corporal's stick. My Uncle Toby carried his cane like a pike. It looks well, at least, quoth my father to himself. Chapter 3. My Uncle Toby turned his head more than once behind him to see how he was supported by the corporal, and the corporal, as oft as he did it, gave a slight flourish with his stick, but not vapouringly, and with the sweetest accent of most respectful encouragement bid his honour never fear. Now my Uncle Toby did fear, and grievously too. He knew not, as my father had reproached him, so much as the right end of a woman from the wrong, and therefore was never altogether at his ease near any one of them, unless in sorrow or distress. Then infinite was his pity, nor would the most courteous knight of romance have gone further, at least upon one leg, to have wiped away a tear from a woman's eye, and yet excepting once that he was beguiled into it by Mrs. Wadman, he had never looked steadfastly into one. and would often tell my father, in the simplicity of his heart, that it was almost, if not loud, as bad as a talking bawdy. And suppose it is, my father would say. Chapter 4. She cannot, quoth my uncle Toby, halting when they had marched up to within 20 paces of Mrs. Wadman's door. She cannot, corporal, take it amiss. She will take it, and please your honour, said the corporal, just as the Jew's widow at Lisbon took it off my brother Tom. And how was that? Quoth my uncle Toby, facing quite about to the corporal. Your honour, replied the corporal, knows of Tom's misfortunes, but this affair has nothing to do with them any further than this, that if Tom had not married the widow, or had it pleased God after the marriage that they had but put pork into their sausages, the honest soul had never been taken out of his warm bed and dragged to the Inquisition. 'Tis a cursed place, added the corporal, shaking his head. When once a poor creature is in, he is in, and please your honour, for ever. 'Tis very true, said my uncle Toby, looking gravely at Mrs. Wadman's house as he spoke. Nothing, continued the corporal, can be so sad as confinement for life, or so sweet, and please your honour, as liberty. Nothing, Trim, said my uncle Toby, musing. Whilst the man is free, cried the corporal, giving a flourish with his stick thus. 1,000 of my father's most subtle syllogisms could not have said more for celibacy. My uncle Toby looked earnestly towards his cottage and his bowling green. The corporal had unwarily conjured up the spirit of calculation with his wand, and he had nothing to do but to conjure him down again with his story, and in this form of exorcism most unecclesiastically did the corporal do it. Chapter 5. As Tom's place, and please your honour, was easy, and the weather warm, it put him upon thinking seriously of settling himself in the world, and as it fell out about that time that the Jew who kept a sausage shop in the same street had the ill luck to die of a strangury, and leave his widow in possession of a rousing trade, Tom thought, as everybody in Lisbon was doing the best he could devise for himself, there could be no harm in offering her his service to carry it on. So without any introduction to the widow, except that of buying a pound of sausages at her shop, Tom set out, counting the matter thus within himself as he walked along, that let the worst come of it that could, he should at least get a pound of sausages for their worth. But if things went well, he should be set up, inasmuch as he should get not only a pound of sausages, but a wife, and a sausage shop, and please your honour, into the bargain. Every servant in the family, from high to low, wished Tom success, and I can fancy, please your honour, I see him this moment with his white dimity waistcoat and breeches, and the hat a little on one side, passing jollily along the street, swinging his stick with a smile and a cheerful word for everybody he met. But alas, Tom, thou smilest no more, cried the corporal, looking on one side of him upon the ground as if he apostrophised him in his dungeon. Poor fellow, said my uncle Toby feelingly. He was an honest, light-hearted lad, and please your honour, as ever blood warmed. Then he resembled thee, Trim, said my uncle Toby rapidly. The corporal blushed down to his fingers' ends, a tear of sentimental bashfulness, another of gratitude to my uncle Toby, and a tear of sorrow for his brother's misfortunes started into his eye and ran sweetly down his cheek together. My uncle Toby's kindled as one lamp does at another, and taking hold of the breast of Trim's coat, which had been that of L.È.'s, as if to ease his lame leg, but in reality to gratify a finer feeling, he stood silent for a minute and a half, at the end of which he took his hand away, and the corporal, making a bow, went on with his story of his brother and the Jew's widow. Καλό βράδυ.